Good morning, everybody from Australia. This is Grace Harris, your host for Women Unleashed, creating intergenerational transformation through sharing the power of story. I am here today with my guest from South Carolina, therapist, spiritual healer, and coach, Amy Gonzalez-Nelsen. Now, Amy will share with us that the very act of being human is the greatest bravery act of all. I'm very honored to be sharing this sacred space of conversation with this beautiful, beautiful lady. Today, we are going to be tackling some stories that may be confronting for you and may be relevant to you or someone that you love and very close to you. And what I ask of you as you listen to us is to be open minded and to open your heart to potential ways that could really change the trajectory of either your life or the life of someone that you love in a way that you haven't looked at before. Now, I want to welcome my guest, Amy Gonzalez-Nelsen. Amy, you're with us. How are you?
Good. Thank you so much, Grace, for having me on. It's such an honor.
It is. It is my pleasure. It is my honor. And what a privilege to have this technology to be connected together with however many hours time difference, right? I mean, back in the day
Yes, and
when you
across
and
the
I
big
were
blue
little.
ocean.
Yes. Amy and I were just talking before about we both were during the times of the dial-up. Now, many of you don't know what that means. We used to have to listen to this sound before we get connected to the internet. So we have some tolerance on technology. But yeah, so we're so happy to be here with you guys. Amy, please share with us what's unique about your the way that you serve the world is that you didn't come from one traumatic incident or event in your life. You actually had to go through diverse and even like uh, a few consecutive things that had really put you through to the test. I'd love for you to share those with us. And what were you what was the journey going through all of that, and how did you actually eventually come out?
Um, Thank you. So, journeying, everyone's journey is their own. And the beauty of it all is that we can connect with the emotion part of it. Maybe not the same circumstance, and maybe the same circumstance. For me, it started young in a space of being told, oh, you're too emotional, oh, you cry too much, and not understanding that at a very young age, anxiety was beginning to manifest. And mental wellness, those discussions didn't really happen when I was younger. It was always kind of brushed under the table. So thrusted into a space of my parents divorcing young when I was 3, and then culturally moving from different places, and then growing up in an environment. I'm originally from New York, where the more different types of folks that I'm surrounded with, the more you begin to recognize that sense of the words depression and just feeling sad and all of this around the mental wellness part of it. I unfortunately had a situation with suicide. My brother killed himself when he was younger. And that was, I guess, not, I guess, I know, was the first catalyst and the traumatic part of, what does life mean? Where are we that we come to this space that we decide that this is it? I've had enough. And that word enough really was that glue that began to travel with me as I got older and as I experienced life. And I went through 9/11. I went through my entire world just shattering before my face, and not just myself, but my surrounding, um, fellow countrymen, fellow world fellows. It wasn't just me. Again, another layer of what is enough, and this space of how do I handle all this incoming, and it became an internal struggle. So I am a very compassionate and empathetic person by trade or fault, if you want to say, and this need to help others began to blend itself with what others were going through and myself, right? So it was determining what is mine, what is not mine. So again, that mental wellness thread continued to began to unravel with this giant ball of life. And with it came a move to a different state, trying a time of partnership with someone and having two children and having issues with being a mom, infertility, now that's hitting a whole space mentally about what my role is as a woman, what my role is as a mother, again, all of these levels. I know folks are thinking, what else could happen? Well, there's more, everyone. So take a listen because it keeps unraveling. But what I found was the enough kept brewing, and it kept brewing inside of me to say, this can't be it. This can't be all that there is. My anxiety is not the whole of me. There's got to be more. I'm a seeker, I'm a solution driven person. I have a no personal space person. So I am very much wanting to hug and love people and really help. So I knew that this journey wasn't just a solo one. I knew that there were other folks out there that were part of my story, that indirectly were part of my story, and how could I seek that help as well as help myself. So when I was in a space of deciding what is next, I've got two young boys. They were both recently diagnosed with autism, so they're on the autism spectrum. They themselves diagnosed with anxiety, and here I am as an adult now with anxiety, and it was this explosion, this internal explosion of actually hearing the word enough.
Mm.
And I'm like, well, where did that come from? You're looking around. I was like, is there someone else in this room? But that other person was me. And that enough was, okay, I have to choose now where I go with this. I could not take it any longer, those thoughts that were in my head, that were in my body. And it became my detriment because my health was affected and everything else became affected. So with it, it's this huge thread from young age until now that is now weaving this entire tapestry of worry and fear and anxiety. And that cloak is heavy. It was time to take off. It was time to really just put it down and start asking the questions. How can I seek help? What is it that I need to know more about? I did the traditional therapy route, but I also sought out alternative methods. I love, um, you know, we as humans are here for a reason. So we have developed things throughout our existence that are so part of us, returning back to Mother Nature, returning to the stars, returning to this space of that there is more to this than that scientific. So it's like, you know what? I could do a combination of both. I'm going to add both to it. And that's when this opening up and this development for me said, okay, with this trauma, and at the time, I didn't even recognize it as trauma. I recognized it as like, it's just life,
Mm.
right? And when I really got into the nitty gritty of it, I was like, well, no, this is trauma. My body, my mind, my soul, my spirit had very traumatic happenings.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah. Deep breath, everyone.
Thank you for being so open and for sharing so much lived experience and wisdom. Now, Amy, you have a company called Bravery Brigade, and you have a modality that you've developed by yourself in a program that you run, which is called Intuitive Soul Polishing. And you talk about the four P's to peace. And I love it, perspective, you said practicing life, patience, and purpose. I love those, and I cannot wait to touch into them. But there was something that you mentioned about 5, 6 minutes ago, and I just want to go back to that a little bit. You kept hearing the word enough, and it wasn't once, it was twice or three times, and then you realized that that wasn't a voice elsewhere but the voice from within you, and you realized that all these things that got stuck in your mind and in your body, and the operative word I'm saying here is in your body. And it's so true. I think this is so important to just emphasize this a little bit, because A lot of us don't realize that how we feel life, how we do life, and when we don't let it flow, especially the adversity, it gets stuck not just in our mind but in our body, and we do get sickness, illness, anxiety, depression. It does manifest in many different types of illnesses. And the
Absolutely.
beautiful thing that you've shared with me a while back, with just the two of us talking off the air, is that one of the things that you love to take your patients through and your clients through is movement. And this is something that I'm really, really passionate about. I use a lot of movement in my own modalities, and also when I speak on stage, I just get everyone to move. Now, let's talk a little bit about how does movement actually heal you, knowing that things do get stuck, not just in your mind, but in your body?
Okay, well, I've always been a lover of music and dance, and even as a young girl, just loving the sensation, how it feels to move in your body. But as I grew up and grew older, the world as we knew it began to stifle that. Sit still, don't move so much. Your expression needs to be contained, and that in itself too creates more havoc on the body than we realize. Our bodies are meant to move. So when I was transitioning from New York to North Carolina, when I moved, I noticed how stagnant I became, and not just physically but mentally too. I did hit this space, and depression, I like to use deep rest, right? My body and mind needed to be in a space of deep rest to really kind of regroup and gather. So I want to say that it was like, this time of amnesia that my body had for a while, and it got to a space where it couldn't stand it anymore because I move naturally with the vibrations of our planet. We all do. That's how we connect with people. Every single one of us emits our own vibration in its own frequency. So when I started to really branch out to these different modalities, sound healing, and just music, and how much music has moved me, I was like, there's got to be something other. And all you yogis out there, please forgive me. Yoga was not enough. Yoga would just keep me still. And I remember taking a class. I was like, fine, I'm going to go take another yoga class because I need to find this space of stillness. And I'm an anxiety eater, so I'm eating another piece of bread because bread is yummy. And I find this yoga studio and I go in, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to take a beginning yoga class. And everyone in there is double my age. So, I was like, okay, I'm in the beginning yoga class. But yet all of these women and men were so in their glory and in their space. And I remember like peeking one eye open, and I'm like, I can't stand it. When is the class over? And one of the ladies said, hey, why don't you try this practice called Nia? And I was like, oh, okay, I'll give it a shot. So NIA stands for Neurological Integrative Action, and it is comprised of 9 different movement arts. So I was literally stepping into the biggest like plethora of movement. It has jazz, modern dance, Duncan dance. It has Aikido, Taekwondo, Tai Chi. It has Feldenkrais technique, Alexander technique, and it has yoga. And I was like, whoa, well, I couldn't ask for anything better than that. Took my first class, and I'm moving. And not only am I moving, but I'm vocalizing, and I'm hooting, I'm hollering, and I'm breaking out from the traditional way my body was taught to move, right? I'm going back to the way it was meant to move, the way each and every one of us has that opportunity to move through history, through culture. And I sobbed my eyes out, and I cried and I cried. And I went up to the teacher and I said, what is this? And she's like, oh, it's the magic of Nia. I said, well, you could take that magic and shove it. I was so angry at what was coming out of my body. But that was it. That was that light. Like, wait a second. If movement could do this for me, I want to know more. I want in. I want to know how this could be, how that this one class began that opening of the things that were so stuck on a cellular level that I didn't even know existed in my hips, in my shoulders, in my fingertips, like so many things. And it was like, here I am, I'm a generational breaker. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to tap into the natural space of my body, and I'm going to listen, and I'm going to understand that through movement we find healing, right? Through movement we find joy. I'm gonna get emotional.
Me
So,
too. And
so that really became the catalyst for what I do now, because in this movement, I am a self-proclaimed bravery activator. I realized that in that space, I was activating and reactivating and rediscovering the power of movement,
wow.
right? And the power of what it is to be human, flat out, no gender, right? Just to be human. And then tapping into, if we've made it this far on the planet, then we are doing something right. Like generations and cultures before, they had to tell stories through body. They reenacted, things out in the world through movement, right? There's something to it. So
Oh,
I can go on about body movement.
you're preaching to the converted. As a shamanic practitioner, I cannot agree more. I cannot agree more. However, I just want to talk about, because it's beautiful, but many of us are in space of fear. So,
Mhm.
Amy, take me to open my heart. How do I, if I was, there are more than 50 shades of fear.
Mm.
Fear comes to us in sometimes in a different appearance that we don't directly recognize to be fear, but we can get really, really manipulated by our own fear.
Mhm.
How do we move through fear?
Great, great, great question. That was a question that was brought up to me when I was in that space of enough. Fear obviously was the at times unwelcomed guest that continued to knock at my door. And it would fuel that part. And that's where the anxiety comes in too, right? It partnered its way into, let's be safe, right? Keeping you in this space of let's be safe and do nothing. Let's just stay in this little pocket of yours and not reach out, because what could happen? Oh, the what ifs and could haves and should haves all began to play and wreak havoc on my mind. And with it became the combined of the mental, the emotional, the physical, and what I was choosing to participate in, the things I read, the people I surrounded myself with, everything plays a role in this fear. So I hit that enough. I hit that space where, I had a choice to confront. And that's what I tell a lot of clients. It all comes down to choice. You could choose to confront fear and really see it for what it is. And you're so spot on when you say it's more than 50 shades. Fear can, when you shift the perspective, can be a part of your journey of healing, because fear gives us that opportunity to look at it for what it is. And you then ask, is it real or is it not real? Is it made up or is it true? And you begin to ask those questions for self. This is a solo journey, folks. I mean, when we get to this space, it's you with you. And it's really that vulnerability of space of, how can fear be a friend and a motivator? Fear is there to help us not run into the street because we fear we are invincible, right? Fear helps us bring the awareness of, you know what? I'm going to just take a moment and pause before I react, right? It's the idea to not respond so quickly. So I'm going to allow at times for fear to provide what it needs to, but cut it at the pass before it gets to the space where it becomes detrimental, if that makes sense.
Mm.
You know? So
Yeah.
for those who are listening there, it's when you get to that space of patience and you're pausing and you're practicing the practice of life, life is going to give you different opportunities to then decide, where do you go from here? It's all up to you folks how you go forward, right? But it's in every single one of us to have the choice to choose. And then when it does come up, it's not getting rid of it, it's moving through it. It's the idea of journeying with it to get to that space of healing. So when it does come up again, you're fully equipped with that trigger. Oh, here comes that trigger. I've had this before. this feels familiar. So what tools do I have that I already practice that I could move forward? Does that help
It
explain?
really, really does. And it's the best segue to my next question to you. But before I do ask the next question, I feel like what I just heard from you is that fear will always be here. It's part of us. And I guess there's a point in our life when when we are in a position to choose that fear is not something to suppress, get rid of, and completely eradicate, but rather move through with, because it's quite useful if we know how to actually make it work for us. Yeah.
Right.
So
I would love to add too, again, when we talk about, my anxiety, it's not the whole of me, it's a part of me. So same with fear. Fear is not the whole of you. It's just a portion of the journey that you're on. So again, that's where perspective comes in. When you pause and take a shift in perspective and we're like, fear, I'm going to put that in my backpack for temporary, because it's going to, assist me into, making the best decision for me if I choose to look at it that way, right? Because that's where choice comes in.
yes, thank you. And that is my next question is your four P's to peace. And the very first one is perspective. And I just love talking about perspective. One of my frameworks is the paradigms of self-love. And I always talk about fearless paradigms of self-love, or the fear-based. And perspective, with everything, you really have to be careful, because sometimes your perspective may be fear-based. You would make decisions that are fear-based, or you could have fearless perspective, which really catapults you to creating decisions that are, changing trajectory, not just here in your life now, but intergenerationally. So, take me through the four P's to peace, please, Amy.
Uh, okay, first of all, you said that beautifully. So I just want to acknowledge that about perspective. That was so well said. Yes, perspective came to me when I was in the midst of deciding, divorce, separating from my husband, having two young boys, and how I was going to move forward. And really, again, breaking through that generational breaker of sticking it out for the kids. It just became this moment of like, okay, I want my children to know what living authentically is like, because I want to live authentically, right? I want my children to know what it is to truly be respectful for self. All of those questions were louder than the idea of, well, I'm just going to do what, I'm going to stick it out for my kids and just stay in this marriage. So that's when the term about shifting perspective came in. So I started creating this little kit for myself, this toolkit, and of four P's. It was easy for me to remember. I'm a big lover of the Four Agreements, the book, if you've ever read it. So four became the magic number, and it was easy for me to remember. And the components that stuck out the most for me was perspective was P number one. My perspective is my truth. However, if I give the opportunity, if I give myself the opportunity to look at someone's other perspective, then I have a larger view than just here. I'm allowing that alternative view to come in, which then puts me in a space of truly being humble and being like, yeah, okay, maybe my way could use some help, and being open to that. And then it moved into practicing. I was now teaching this practice called Nia, and understanding that I was choosing to participate in my life. So life requires us to practice it. And I remember folks would ask us, well, when do you get it? I said, you don't. I think I'll get it when I'm ready to transition to the great beyond. I'm still learning, I'm still evolving, and that's practicing. But if you choose not to, life is going to continue to go on without you.
Oh, let me
Time is
pause there. Oh, okay. It's beautiful. It's just, yeah, practicing life, because it's gonna keep going on without you if you don't practice it. And when do you get it? You probably may not until
correct.
you go to thank you.
Yeah. And thank you. I came to that kind of epiphany when I went through cancer, and I was going in for my surgery. And I remember driving into the hospital, and again, this, all those guides up there were like, okay, here's this epiphany right now. Someone is being born and someone is dying. Right. But what's happening? Life is still going on, right? I'm still driving in my car, the wind is still blowing, like nothing's stopping. And that's where this reminder that time is not linear, time is cyclical. The energy is going to continue to go on. So you either jump on that train or you don't, right? It's so simplistic. And it's one of those like aha type of situations. And that's when I'm like, well, I got to decide if I'm going to practice it or if I'm not. So that's where P2 came in. And then it moved into patience. And whoa, that patience virtue, my mom's still waiting for me to get it. I didn't get it this lifetime. So I know that's my karmic path. Patience. Oh my God. As a little girl, and that was part of the anxiety. I had no patience. I was so ready to go to the next space because it was a means of protecting and self-protecting. If I already know what's coming next, then I'll be okay. But it was doing such a disservice to me because I was missing out on all of that in between because I was so eager for the end to come. I was so ready for things to already happen so I could feel comforted and safe because I could control it, right? But it was doing the opposite. Patience is still so much about control because it's control for self, right? It's controlling your space and what you have. And it's giving you that opportunity not to miss out on all of that middle ground. So, yes, as much as I wanted to get to the end of the trauma that I've had, but you know what? Within that trauma was laughter and crying and kicking and screaming and cursing and lots of ice cream. All of that needed to happen, right? To understand the wisdom and the lesson that came with it. And then the final piece, purpose. And I'm realizing that, yes, I want the grand end of what my purpose is in life, but I realized the purpose is just in today. If I'm choosing to get up in the morning to participate and put my pants on, that's purpose, right?
Yeah.
That's purpose. So that all of those 4 P's became the dialogue I would use while I was teaching class, and folks would ask me, where did you find that? I said, I made it up for myself just to get through my day. And they started asking, well, can you teach that to me? And I was like, are you sure? Like, if that, yeah, I would love to. And that's when this developed into every one of us could use a bit of soul polishing. Every one of us could have an opportunity to just shine up that shoe, right? That's where that intuitiveness comes in. Each and every one of us has the ability to be a bravery activator. Each and every one of us has the ability to polish up someone else's soul, right? But it starts with self first.
Wow. Ooh. There's it was a beautiful, beautiful way for you to wrap it with a bow, this conversation. But there's a couple of things that I just feel that you need to be writing a book about this. When you said that patience itself, you said that patience in itself is your loving way of controlling what's inside of you and giving love to yourself that it's gonna be okay. You don't have to always know what's gonna be in the end. The ice cream and the kissing and the laughing and the kicking and the screaming is part of practicing life. And you said a purpose, like, when a toddler, for example, their purpose is just to learn to walk. They fall down and they get back up because I just need to learn to walk. I don't really care about anything else. The purpose is right now when you're giving birth, for example. I mean, the world could be crumbling down. You got to push that baby out. That is your purpose for this moment.
That's right.
So
That's right.
it really is a moment to moment. And what I love about what you shared, Amy, is that when people said to you, wow, can you teach us that? And you're saying to them, are you sure it's something that I developed for myself so I can get through? Because what that tells me, and this is what I really want to convey in Women Unleashed, is that we as women, we are the greatest untapped reservoir of talent in the world. And we've been living for so long in anarchy, patriarchy, and a lot of us don't have a voice. But we do have a voice, just like Amy had found her voice through her journey. And I want to ask you this final question, Amy, is for those who have not quite tapped into that voice, that intuitive soul polishing for self. What's the first step?
The first step is just acknowledging to yourself that I've had enough because I am enough. It starts there. And then I want to say that for all that are listening, when I stepped into that vulnerable space, I began to notice how many women began to show up for me all over the space, on the coffee shop line, at my local, supermarket, random, but I don't believe in random. So I know they were placed for a reason. And though our interaction may have been a few seconds to maybe an hour, over a cup of tea, there was an exchange there that I absolutely needed. And I knew that I wasn't alone. And that's when this began to really open up, that when I gave myself the chance to be vulnerable and just say, hey, or talk about something, or someone noticed something about me, I I stepped into it. I allowed myself to share a bit about it and noticed that another woman was there to say, hey, I've been through this or I've done this. And that was that, like, well, wait a second, there's so many of us out there. And then obviously, as I went through journeying through this, heck man, women roar. I mean, it's just this amazing, it goes beyond just the gender part. It's that balance of the masculine and feminine energy that each and every one of us, in my belief, need to get to, because that's what pushes us forward, right? And that's what connects us all. And it's that acknowledgement of this collaboration is absolutely what we need, because we're all in it together, right? It requires every one of us, or else we're all going down with the ship, right? It's just, again, this, reality of, it would behoove us not to connect with someone else, right? Because this journey requires everybody.
Mm.
And there's a bit of wisdom in every single person out there, right? So that's where that shared wisdom is. I mean, just now, the two of us, my God, I wish I could come hug you. Like, I mean, there's just such an amazing connection. And that's what this is so beautiful about, is the more we can collaborate with each other.
And that's exactly it. Just because we had this and we have a time frame and we're going to end the conversation, it's not the end. Really, it is the beginning. For those of you who have just been listening to me and Amy, it is the beginning. And me and Amy, it's the beginning for our friendship and our collaboration. But Amy, how can we have more and see more of you? Where do we find you?
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to share where they can find me. My website is braverybrigade.com. I do the process called intuitive soul polishing. So it's a holistic guide coaching opportunity, just the two of us. It's done via Zoom. It could be done in person if you're over here in the States. And we just journey through those 4 piece to piece. And I'm on Instagram under Amy Gonzalez-Nelsen, and on Facebook under Amy Gonzalez-Nelsen. I would like to also say that with everything that I journey with you and all the listeners, I use the phrase brave on. And when I envision the word brave, I envision a bold, resilient, authentic, vulnerable energy. To me, that's what being brave is all about. So that's
Wow.
me.
Would you please say that again, please? Brave on.
Yes. So brave on, when I envisioned the word brave, when I was really acknowledging that being human in itself is brave, that acronym for me was B, to be bold. And the R is we are resilient, right? We are resilient energy. To be authentic in our lives, to be vulnerable in our lives, and the ease, the energy that we each possess. So when we embody that, brave on, folks, right? Everybody brave on.
Thank you so much, everyone. Amy, I love you. I love you, everyone. And let us get on with our day and brave on. Thank you so much for sharing
Thank
this
you.
space with
Brave
us.
on, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.